Welcome to my final assignment, Learning Leadership, Synopsis of the AIC program. In this presentation, I will provide a brief synopsis of the 11 courses we have taken in the Adult Community and Higher Education program, and tie in how Preskill and Brookfield's 9 elements of learning leadership have been presented throughout the program. The synopsis is purely my reflection on each course. I understand and respect others may have different memories of each course, and perhaps you may not agree entirely with my perceptions. We are, after all adults in this learning community, and diversity of opinion is encouraged. How fitting, this was our first course together and the beginning of our formal learning journey as leaders. During this course, we learned learning happens in the spaces. Through the moments of pause and reflection, we learn a greater and deeper meaning. I will also pose that leadership happens in the spaces. The conventional image of leadership is the coach's big speech before the championship game, or the crusader leading the troops into battle, or the CEO's public address to the masses. These conventional images actually cloud people's perceptions and do not reflect authentic leadership. Allowing leadership to happen in the spaces creates space for openness to occur. Preskill and Brookfield described openness as the root of learning leadership. Without openness, we can never have collective leadership. Space allows for transformation to occur. Transformation occurs in a slow and gradual process. The balance of becoming and being comes to mind here. If someone is always becoming and never being, they will never have an identity. Conversely, if someone is always being and never becoming, they will never evolve. As learning leaders, we need a balance of both, to develop as leaders, but to also give us time to become comfortable within our new skin as a leader. Organizational theory. Using metaphors to define organizations was a very useful tool to delve deeper into the complex topic of organizational theory. Mind mapping was used as an extensive tool to organize and synthesize one's thoughts. As learning leaders, having a keen sense of how organizations operate is vital to success. However, my biggest leadership learning from this course was not from the formal curriculum. On the final day of the course, Patricia Brown, our instructor, gave us each a gift. She gave me the Tao of Leadership. This book is full of wisdom. I will share with you a short passage from the book which I think exemplifies our cohort. A good group. A good group is better than a spectacular group. When leaders become superstars, the teacher outshines the teaching. Very few superstars are down to earth. Fame breeds fame, and before long they get carried away with themselves. They fly off center and crash. The wise leader settles for good work and then lets others have the floor. The leader does not take all the credit for what happens and has no need for fame. A moderate ego demonstrates wisdom. I think this passage personifies our group well. Each person has taken their turn being a leader, and no one attempted to be a superstar and dominate the group. This is a good example of learning democracy through our practice as students throughout the program. History and philosophy of adult education. In order to know where you're going, it is important to understand where you've been. During this course, the notion of adult education as vocation and professionalism was first introduced to us. Examples from the early founding institutions, such as the YMCA, Frontier College, and the Antigonish movement, are all examples of social action in adult education through a Canadian context towards professionalization. Roby Kidd was an inspirational character in the development of adult education as a vocation. Described as both architect and symbol, Kidd was the director of the Canadian Association of Adult Educators. In his 1956 director's report, he stated his major concern for the future plight of adult education. I only have one serious apprehension about the future. More and more, the conceptions of continuous learning is being accepted. But will we have the staff who are numerous and talented enough? Every year, several important positions are open, which require men and women of considerable capacity and long experience. So we quickly look around for a suitable person, as if we do not fully understand that such people are not just found, they must be grown. And the growing period starts many years before. Kidd's statement still rings true today, many years later. Critically reflecting on my own lived experience, I can very much relate to being victim of attempting to find great instructors. I've had to reframe my own perception to understand I cannot find great instructors. I have to facilitate the growth of great instructors. Preskill and Brookfield wrote of the importance of supporting the growth of others. Leaders must be aware of the passions of their colleagues. They can divert resources and revise goals to feed those passions and spur the intrinsic desire to grow on learning. From this, I have changed my perspective to view the instructor position as a leadership position of continuous growth. The philosophy part of the course taught us about the different learning philosophies popular in adult education. My belief is a person's learning and leadership philosophies will be closely linked. As learning leaders, we need to identify which leadership philosophy we identify with and how it correlates with our learning and teaching philosophy. Of course, actions speak louder than words, so we must also identify if our behaviors and actions correlate with our philosophies. Your personal philosophy is the lens through which you view the world, or as Alfroza asks us to ponder, what is your worldview or the primary lens you can use to analyze human needs? We are always learning. Education has three contemporary methods that facilitate the learning process, known as formal, informal, and incidental, and one developing theory that is called subconscious or unconscious learning. Leadership is a learned skill. There is no such thing as a born leader. Everyone is born with the capacity to lead. Just like any other skill, some people are better at leading than others. Learning leadership through a formal setting is likely the most visible form of leadership development. As discussed in this class, the Banff Center offers formal leadership development programs. As a learning leader, I have had the fortune of taking part in leadership training at the Banff Center through the Chair Academy. The Chair Academy is a formal leadership development program. There's a curriculum, there are course outlines, assignments, facilitators, and all the rigor you would expect from a formal training course. However, my greatest development did not take place through the formal curriculum. It took place when I had the opportunity to talk with and learn informally with the other participants. Another powerful informal learning relationship developed through the Chair Academy was my relationship with my mentor. My mentor was an expert at asking open-ended questions, listening, and probing for more depth. I spoke, and he listened. This leads to how incidental learning happens. Through my observation of my mentor, I learned in order to be a more effective transformational leader, I needed to listen more to others. Incidentally, my mentor taught me the art of communication. Preskill and Brookfield identified Habermas's 4 elements of authentic communication: comprehensibility, truth, rightness, and authenticity. Lastly, a 4th way adults learn, in an area which we have discussed during this program, is subconsciously or unconsciously. Thinking back on my experience at the Banff Center, there is something that needs to be said for this setting. Being surrounded by the strength and beauty of the Rockies, trekking up Tunnel Mountain after class, breathing in the fresh air and being disconnected from the outside world allowed for a safe and inspirational setting for learning. During this time, ideas would pop into my head, or concepts that seemed clouded would suddenly have clarity. I believe this is an example of how an inspirational environment can facilitate subconscious learning. I was learning, and I didn't even know it. Research methodologies. Similar to how a person learns philosophy can dictate the lens of the world view, Griesbach adds the next layer of depth to worldviews by introducing the popular or the post-positivist, social constructivist, advocacy, and participatory and pragmatic worldviews. As quoted on a discussion board, we do not live in a world of reality, but of perceptions. Griesbach used the mandala as a metaphor for the development of research. A mandala is a Hindu or Buddhist symbol of the universe. Mandalas are complex patterns which exhibit radial balance. The metaphor as it pertains to research is to give credence to all worldviews and create a balanced yet definitive answer to the research question. This metaphor can also apply to learning leadership. The balanced approach can represent a democratic approach to leadership. A mandala is not a hierarchy, but closer to a complex web. Preskill and Brookfield stated, democratic power is power that is broadly distributed to serve the common good. Hence, democratic power is balanced, yet definitive. Globalization and development. We live in a globally connected society. I didn't quote Jarvis when providing a synopsis of lifelong learning, and no reflection of the AIC program would be complete without hearing about Jarvis. Jarvis introduced the concept of the sub and superstructures and their intricate balance of these two concepts. As noted by Jarvis, Marx described the substructure as the economic system and the superstructure as everything else in social and cultural life. From a Western perspective, the economic substructure dominates what we see in the media and thus influences the superstructure to accept what is presented as true. I appreciate how Preskill and Brookfield challenged our conventional way of thinking about leadership in the opening chapter. The challenge was to look beyond what has been culturally framed to equate effective leadership and to look within. They defined their concept of leadership and detailed the 9 competencies through their text. From a global perspective, I feel learning to question is vitally important. As stated earlier, our Western media is influenced by the dominant substructure. By learning to question, we can create clarity. Preskill and Brookfield stated, good questions shake people out of their conventional thinking, deepen understanding, and help lead the way toward envisioning new possibilities. This is why learning to question is such an effective tool for learning leaders. However, as described in the text, asking the right question to the wrong person can have dire consequences. Essentially, this defines oppression. Often we consider ourselves to live in a free and open society, but do we? So in the spirit of learning to ask questions, I will leave this portion with a question for you to ponder. What oppressive pressures are you subject to that you may not be aware of? Or, how are your actions liberating for you and oppressive to others? Perspectives on community. Perhaps this was our most controversial yet most enlightening course in the entire program. The controversy stemmed from a course on community, yet the leader of our community seemed to want to destroy the community developed by our cohort. If I were to equate this experience to a type of chocolate, it would be a bitter, dark variety. This relationship did provide a great opportunity for some incidental learning to observe how not to treat people within a learning community. This was a very powerful lesson for me, observing how being closed to openness can deflate a very engaged and intelligent group. The other most profound concept I learned from this course was learning about the two different types of human interaction introduced by Tönnies as Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Quoting a passage from my final paper in this course, according to Galbraith, Gemeinschaft has the characteristic of families, neighborhoods, and friendship groups that relate to each other in a sense of mutually stability, common identity, and concerns, and a common subscription to social norms, bonds, and obligations. The characteristics of Gemeinschaft communities are more consistent with the qualities of the good community. Gesellschaft communities, on the contrary, are contractual in nature with a means-ends relationship. Hugo described Gesellschaft relationships as urban, comparative, heterogeneous, impersonal, secular, superficial, transitory, and fragmented. These concepts of human interaction shook me out of my conventional thinking about how I relate to others, particularly in the workplace and with my instructors. After critically reflecting on my interactions, I identified I was much more focused on developing Gesellschaft communities. Something needed to change. I started to socialize more with my instructors and hosting meetings with them in public open spaces. I wanted to foster the concept of the Gemeinschaft community and to actively develop this type of community. Of course, I cannot develop the community on my own. Preskill and Brookfield identified the concept of learning collective leadership. They identified in collective leadership, everyone accepts responsibility for the outcomes and does everything possible to keep moving the community in a productive and mutually engaging direction. I must admit my group is not there yet, and as we have discussed, there are many challenges to collective leadership in large post-secondary institutions, but I maintain critical hope that I will succeed. Workplace Learning and Society. This course contrasted the perspectives on community course quite starkly when considering the style of facilitation. The environment created was very open, accepting all ideas as valid. We are all explorers, not treasure hunters. The conversational technique of the fishbowl was used to create a critical dialogue and was an effective method to engage the class. However, having such an open environment where anything goes was stressful for some. The course readings were not used, and it was unclear what would be covered day to day. I believe this disjuncture allowed us to learn how to let go, and go with the flow of the course to see where it takes us. Learning to let go was an important concept for me. I learned how to do more by doing less. I learned to empower those around me and allow them to do what they do best. Preskill and Brookfield commented on the importance for leaders to support the growth of others. They also warned of the perils and pitfalls of viewing leadership as vocation. Vocation becomes hegemonic when it is used to justify taking on responsibilities and duties that far exceed their energy or capacities, and that destroy their health and personal relationships. By learning to let go, I have found one strategy to avoid the pitfalls of viewing leadership as vocation. Program and practice evaluation. This course was our nuts and bolts types of class. However, if you wanted to plan a program, it is not as simple as follow the 12 steps in Caffarel's interactive model of program planning. Caffarel noted that her model is nonlinear, iterative, and honors diversity to cultures. Preskill and Brookfield identified the final learning task for learning leaders is to create community. When we learn to create community, then we keep a good conversation going about our joint purpose. We identify with others at least as much as with ourselves, and we do all we can to find and promote a mutually advantageous common good. Considering the importance of developing community and the daunting task of program development, it stands to reason that there is a correlation between them. As we have explored throughout our AIC program, it takes a village to educate a student. It takes that same village to develop educational programs. One aspect I enjoyed of this course was it linked theory to practice. A term that has resonated with me was coined by Paulo Freire, or praxis, which is to put theory into action. If theory is never practiced, authenticity can never be attained. Writing educational research. This course was the most intimidating for me when I first reviewed the courses required for the AIC program. I felt like my weaknesses and limitations would be exposed in this course. I did not believe academic writing was my forte. During one of our first readings, Irving stated the secret to academic writing. Your success with academic writing depends on how well you understand what you are doing as you write, and then you approach the writing task. Irving then went on to dispel the 7 most common myths about academic writing. After reading this article and participating on the discussion board, I developed critical hope for my writing abilities. When I once viewed a blank Word document page as an onerous and daunting task, I now viewed it as a blank slate, open to numerous possibilities. Previously, I displayed naive hope that my academic writing would improve. Preskill and Brookfield acknowledged that. Naive hope announces that change will come, but it does not divulge how hard it will be, how great the challenges are, or the fact that by itself it is not nearly enough. I'd equate this to someone who believes all their problems will go away if they can only just win the lottery. Conversely, critical hope acknowledges how destructive the absence of hope can be, but it also comprehends at a profound level how complex and multifaceted it is, the fight for social justice. Now using my academic writing may seem to discount the enormity of Preskill and Brookfield's definition of naive and critical hope. I do not mean to discount the definitions, only to use one small personal example of how transitioning from naive to critical hope empowers people for change. Teaching and learning in higher education. This course both provided clarity and blurred the lines for me. Clarity was provided by providing insight into the connection between excellent teaching practices and deep learning experiences. Essentially, students do not learn at a deep level by mistake. The blurring of the lines happened during this course when I could no longer see the difference between teaching and leadership practices. This course inspired me to write a paper on exploring the similarities between leadership and teaching. Upon critical reflection, I discovered that the more I incorporated leadership practices into my teaching, the better teacher I became. And as I incorporated more educational practices into leading, the better leader I became. This also transformed my opinion of instructors, where I now view the position of an instructor as a leadership position. Preskill and Brookfield wrote about the importance of learning to critically reflect. Critically reflective habit confers a deep benefit than that of procedural utility. It grounds not only our actions, but also our sense of who we are as a leader in an examined reality. We know why we believe what we believe. A critically reflective leader is much better placed to communicate to colleagues and followers, as well as to herself, the rationale behind her practice. For me, this quote is very apparent and takes into account the need as a leader to be critically reflective. In conclusion, my journey through this MEd program has been an enriching and enlightening experience. Any perceptions I had going into the program were quickly dispelled. The quality of the instructors and classmates was second to none. Perhaps now more than ever, the Margaret Wheatley quote we modified to "I learn through you and you learn through we" resonates more than ever. Thanks for the learning journey and best wishes.